It was full steam ahead on the island of Sodor. All the engines were running on time. They wanted to finish their work quickly, because tonight was Halloween. The engines loved seeing the children in their Halloween costumes. And the engines loved to hear tales of ghostly engines and scary steam trains. That evening, Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth Sheds. He said, "Yes, sir," they puffed. Percy thought the smelter's yard was spooky. He was worried about his friends. He whispered nervously. Thomas said cheerfully, added Emily. And they set off for the smelter's yard. The sun was setting, and it was getting dark. Puffed Thomas. Sniffed Emily. Added Thomas. Thomas and Emily enjoyed feeling brave. But when they got to the smelter's yard, it was very spooky. Whispered Emily. Hissed Thomas. They puffed slowly through the piles of jagged steel and twisted scrap. The air grew hotter, and the smoke grew thicker. Harry and Bert were lurking nearby. The two Diesels saw the chance to scare a couple of steamies. When Thomas and Emily rolled by, they moaned and groaned. It sounded spooky. Snapped Emily. Gasped Thomas. Suddenly a freight car began to shudder and shake. Cried Thomas. Wailed Emily. They didn't know Harry and Bert had been bumping the flatbed's buffers. The two naughty Diesels were having great fun. Thomas and Emily pulled up to the smelting shed. They gasped at the ghostly shadows and fizzing sparks. Their wheels felt as if they were frozen, but they had to go inside. Quaked Thomas. Quivered Emily. And they both rolled slowly into the smelting shed. Inside, chains clanked and strange shadows danced across the walls. Thomas puffed, but it was spooky. Emily was turning around, ready to shunt some freight cars. Suddenly, a great whoosh of sparks lit up the shed. Cried Emily. Emily was scared. She didn't notice the huge white tarp. It fell, covering her from funnel to footplate. She steamed away as fast as her pistons could pump. Thomas thought Emily was the ghost, and he raced out of the smelting shed. Cried Thomas. Harry and Bert thought Emily was the ghost too, and they raced away. Thomas was right behind them. And Emily was right behind Thomas. Emily cried. Harry, Bert, Thomas, and Emily raced towards Tidmouth Sheds. Tidmouth Sheds was quiet and peaceful. All the engines were fast asleep. Thomas's whistle soon woke them up. Cried Percy. Suddenly he saw Thomas, Harry, and Bert racing into the yards. He cried. Harry, Bert, and Thomas applied their brakes. They stopped just in time. Whistled Thomas. Percy was scared. But just then, Emily raced under a signal and the tarp flew off. peeped Percy. The engines didn't feel scared anymore, but they did feel foolish. So Topham Hatt arrived, wearing his pajamas. He boomed. Cried Thomas. Said Emily. Added Thomas. So Topham Hatt looked at Harry and Bert. He asked sternly. Bert mumbled. Said Sir Topham Hatt sternly. Said Harry and Bert, and they rumbled away. Whenever Thomas and Emily went back to the smelter's yard, they knew there was nothing to be scared of. After all, there is no such thing as ghosts. It was all silly make-believe.